Status update. Ice. Look, I brought my boat. Can't even put it in the water. We had every intention of doing some fishing today and hopefully getting some good footage for you guys, but it's just not going to happen. The water's still frozen even though it's 60 degrees out here. That's crazy. That's what happens down here in the south. I've had a lot of people ask me a couple questions about my rods and my reels and what I like to use. So we're going to head back to the house. We're going to put the boat back in the garage and we're going to start pulling some of our stuff out and taking a look at what we've got and what we're working with here in the 2018 season. So come along with me. Let's go. So we're back at the house, guys. We got a lot of our rod and reels out, and you could tell we've got a bunch of them. You know, all the time I get asked why I have so many rods. Some people think it's crazy. So one of the reasons that I buy so many rod and reels is because I feel like a kid on Christmas morning every time I get one.
Hey guys, wake up, it's Christmas!
The main reason that I buy so many is so that I'm prepared. You know, I like to tie every bait on that I have a potential to use on a given day and have it ready to go. You know, a big part of preparing for tournaments is pre-practice. It's the things that you do before you even get to the water, before you even get to the lake and put the boat in the water. A big part of that is preparing your tackle and getting your rods and reels ready to go. So I like to have everything tied on that I'm going to potentially be using so that I don't have to spend the time once I'm out there on the water retying or tying a new bait on. It saves me so much time. And I'm a running, gunning kind of guy. So I could hit 50 spots, 60 spots in one day during the tournament. And if I'm having to retie for a lot of those different spots, you know, say 10 of them are riprap, so I need a certain lure. 10 of them might be do nothing banks. I need a different lure. If I don't have all those tied on ready to go already, it kills my day to have to stop and retie over and over and over again. So everything's tied on, everything's ready to go. It's right there. The worst I have to do is open my rod locker up, pull that rod out, and I'm ready to go. And a lot of times I have them all on my front deck already. You know, it's nothing for me to have 10, 15 rods in my front deck because I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I do want to give you one tip as well. If you don't have this many rod and reels at your disposal, go to the tackle store and buy a pack of snaps. This basically turns one of your rod and reels into multiple rods. What it allows you to do is it allows you to tie it on and interchange baits on the fly. So all you have to do is open up the snap, take the current bait off, and then you're ready to put the new bait on easily and you're ready to go and fish. So guys, I'm just going to pull out a couple of my favorites that I have and explain why I use what I use. You know, there's certain setups for certain applications that just work a little bit better for specific reasons. I want to show you guys why that is. And hopefully what this will do is it'll allow you to take this information next time you go out and buy a new rod and reel and really choose the right setup or technique specifically for what you're looking for. Alright, so the first setup that I've pulled out is my flipping setup. This is my meat stick.
What did you say?
With the rod, the two most important factors of a flipping rod to me are going to be the power and then the length. This is a heavy power rod. What that means is it's going to have the backbone to really drive that hook into that fish and get him out of that cover. You know, this setup, that's what it's all about. It's all about getting that fish hooked, get him turned out of that cover, and get him coming towards you. Because the sooner you get him out of that cover, the safer it is. The last thing you want to do is allow that fish to stay in that heavy cover, whether it's grass or a lay down, and get you tangled up and then broken off. So the main factors of this setup are going to be, how can I get that fish hooked, turned, and coming towards me? With the rod, it's that backbone with the power, and then it's that length. I like a 7'6". Sometimes people go up to an 8 foot. That's a little bit too long for me. I'm not very tall, so that's why I choose kind of that 7'6", 7'9" length. As far as the reel goes in this setup, it's a high-speed gear ratio reel. This is a 7.5 to 1. I think it takes up like 33 inches per turn. What that means is every single time I turn that reel handle one full time, it takes up 33 inches of line. So again, it's all about getting that fish turned and out of that cover. This is really going to be the setup that I'm going to use flipping jigs, Texas rigs, punch rigs, anything that I'm going to do up close and personal, flipping into that heavy cover, that close combat fishing is what I'm going to use this setup for. So next up is my crankbait setup. There's so many different kind of crankbaits that I've got quite a few different setups. This one specifically is my deep diving crankbait setup. A few things with the rod that is essential is going to be the action and then again the length. With it being my deep diving crankbait, my main goal is to get that bait thrown out there as far as possible. I need a really long cast because I've got to get this deep diving crankbait down to the bottom, and then that's where I'm going to get those strikes, is on the bottom. So I want to spend as much time on the bottom every cast as possible. So that extra length is what gets me there. Another important part, like I said, was the action. This is a moderate fast action rod, and it's actually a crankbait rod, so it's graphite and glass. It's a combination. The reason that those ingredients are so important in this setup is to give it that soft tip. With these treble hooks, you don't want to rip these treble hooks out of the fish. If you have a really heavy power rod, if you have a rod that has a thick backbone or a big backbone, chances are you're going to rip those treble hooks out of that fish's mouth a lot of times. So this is just a security blanket that allows me to horse them a little bit more, and it has that forgiveness with that soft tip that I don't rip these treble hooks out of that fish's mouth. Another key reason too that goes along those same lines is when that fish eats. When that fish eats this bait, if you immediately set the hook on him, you're going to rip it out of its mouth. You're not allowing that fish to really get that bait good into its mouth. So that soft tip actually loses a little bit of sensitivity, but I'm okay with that because it allows that fish to get it in its mouth good before I'm actually leaning in on him and setting the hook. And then as far as the reel goes in the crankbait setup, guys, I use a real low gear ratio. It's the exact opposite of that flipping setup. It's mostly for fatigue reasons, especially in this deep diving crankbait setup. I use that real low gear ratio because it allows me to get that reel handle turned. And since I'm only taking up, say for example, 22 or 24 inches of line in this 5:1 gear ratio reel, I don't have to pull up as much line every time I turn that handle, and so it keeps the fatigue down, and it's just easier to really utilize a low gear ratio reel when it comes to this crankbait setup. So most of the baits that I'm going to be throwing on these type of setups is going to be crankbaits. You can also throw topwaters or say jerk baits on a setup like this as well. Again, it's that softer tips, it's the treble hook setup. It just allows you that little bit of flexibility and a little security to not allow you to jerk those treble hooks out of that fish's mouth. So next up is my general purpose setup. The reason that I pulled this rod and reel out is basically it's an all-around workhorse. You can use this combination for so many different applications. If there was one rod and reel setup that I would recommend somebody having, it would probably be this one. You can throw so many different things. You could really throw almost every single thing except for your really light baits and your really heavy baits on this setup. It's just in the middle ground of just about every single setting. The rod is a 7-foot medium heavy action rod. Basically just in the middle. It's not too short, not too long. The action is not too soft, and it's not too heavy. So it just works out. So for general purpose, this is just a great all-around rod. And then as far as the reel goes, again, it's kind of middle of the line. It's a 6:4-to-1 gear ratio reel. It's not too fast. It's not too slow like in the crankbait setup. So it really allows you to just be in the middle of the line and just throw so many different applications with this all-around purpose reel. A setup like this, you know, you could throw spinner baits on it, you could throw lipless crankbaits on it, chatter baits, swim jigs, Texas rigs, worms. So there's so many different kind of things that you can throw on this one rod and reel right here. That would be the main reason that if there's one recommendation that I could give everybody and one rod and reel that they should have in their arsenal, it's going to be this one. And then the last setup that I pulled out that I want to show you all that I use quite often is going to be a spinning setup. You know, we call this a sissy stick around here.
You little sissy boy! Def Leppard sucks!
And I'm more of a power fisherman, so I'd much rather be throwing one of my bait casters power fishing. But, you know, on those bluebird days, sometimes you've got to downsize. On those heavy pressured lakes, sometimes you've got to slow down and downsize that presentation, and a spinning setup is wonderful for that. I prefer a 7-foot medium light rod. This allows me to throw all kinds of different sizes, from basically an 1/8 ounce all the way up to a 1/4 ounce, which is what most of my finesse tactics are going to be. It's a 2500 series reel. I have a Shimano Stratic on here, but the 2500 series allows me to put, you know, like 110, 115 yards of, say, mono or braid on the reel. Even though it's a medium light action rod, I feel like it has quite the backbone to allow me to handle those big fish even on these small hooks. And then most of what you're going to be throwing on this setup are, like I said, going to be your finesse tactics, like your drop shots, like your shaky heads, like your Ned rigs, your wacky rigs, those finesse tactics that when you've got to downsize or slow down, you're able to throw efficiently on a setup like this. Alright, so that's it. You saw a couple of my favorite combinations that I'm going to be using this season. Let me know what your favorites are. Let me know which rod and reels you guys choose, why you prefer what you prefer. Hopefully some of you learned something. Hopefully you'll be able to apply some of this information next time you all go out to buy a rod and reel. You also saw some of my boat in this video. I've been thinking about doing a boat tour and showing you guys what I'm going to be using this season, and some of the equipment that's on it as well. So drop a comment and let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. Season's getting ready to start, guys. Hopefully we'll have a lot more fishing footage for you guys soon. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.